Today, we're talking about leaky gut syndrome. OM to the G. Amy, per my usual, I do the intro, you start us off. So
I
say a few words, if
know.
you would, about leaky gut.
Oh man. Leaky gut's such an interesting topic to chew on just because there's so many misconceptions about what it is and what it is not.
Mhm.
I think with leaky gut, a really important aspect to understand is that like leaky gut or intestinal permeability as it's referred
Mhm.
to in a lot of the scientific literature, everyone has some level of permeability.
Mhm.
I think again, it's always interesting to come at it from that angle. I think just to start, like, it's not necessarily always a bad thing. Um,
Mhm.
we have at different points of the day, you might be having more permeable, a more leaky gut or permeable gut, and at other points in the day that there's less leakiness. In terms of illness and causing issues and symptoms, a lot of the things that commonly get attributed to permeability are things like bloating, gut symptoms. But a lot of the symptoms, or a lot of the things that are actually a result of leaky gut, don't necessarily always get contributed to it, like inflammation, joint pain, headaches,
Mhm.
cognitive issues, uh, depression, anxiety, those sorts of things that aren't necessarily gut related tend to be more associated with leaky gut. A lot of metabolic issues tend to be a lot more associated with leaky gut than gut issues
Yep.
themselves. And it's not to say that people with gut issues don't have leaky gut, because they very much can, but it's usually more associated with the severity of the IBS or IBD than anything else. Um, but yeah, I guess we should talk about like what exactly it is too. I just kind of jumped into like, oh,
Good point.
there's so many potential like misconceptions around
Yeah.
what is leaky gut and what isn't. Uh,
Yep.
if you want to just kind of talk a little bit about like what it is in a little bit more detail.
The gut lining itself, so that layer of one cell deep tissue that separates your microbes, your microbiome, and the inside of your gut from the rest of your freaking body, that layer, that single cell layer of tissue, the gut lining can either be more porous or more leaky like a sieve, or it could be relatively tight and taut and toned and not letting a lot of stuff through. Ideally, you want your gut and your body to choose what gets through. So it can kind of like, in a way, it could say, oh, bacterial toxin, no thank you. You go
Right.
back over there. Vitamin B12, come on in. Protein, come on in. Carbohydrates, come on in. And it can traffic that and select and use receptors and traffic that to some extent. But with leaky gut, you have either big gaping holes in between the cells, or entire cells could get obliterated. And if you're not rebuilding the gut lining and those cells at a fast enough pace, you're left with a poor quality lining. So now instead of having, like, just use another metaphor, instead of having a barrier that's something akin to leather, now you have something that's more akin to cheesecloth, separating you and your microbes. So it can be pretty detrimental because you lose that ability to decide what comes in and what does not. And it ends up meaning that, ironically, a lot of your nutrients have a harder time getting into your body, and you get more like malabsorption type patterns. And all the bad stuff, the bacterial and the candida toxins, end up getting through more readily than you would want. So it's a big old cluster F.
There's definitely been cases where I don't think leaky gut has been at play that I've
Mm-hmm.
worked with. So not every severe IBS SIBO case I think has leaky gut going on.
Yeah.
Um, but it's always interesting to me, like the people that do have pretty strong joint pain. That's something I see a
Yeah.
lot in when there's leaky gut involved. I think a lot of histamine type reactions I
Yeah.
see more so when there's leaky gut.
Yeah.
um, I think when there's kind of more systemic type symptoms, more systemic type symptom profile than um, just kind of bloating or reflux or kind of some of these other symptoms that get attributed to permeability and leaky gut.
Yeah, I would say the same. I think that, there definitely is research that a lot of people with irritable bowel syndrome have leaky gut,
Yeah.
and a lot of people with celiac disease and Crohn's and colitis. So it's not to say that those folk don't have it, but what is more closely linked, and the severity is more closely linked, is metabolic syndrome
Yeah.
and widespread systemic inflammatory type events. So, like, if you have abdominal adiposity, if you have hypertension, diabetes, if you have something like that, or if you have a lot of joint pain or a lot of brain fog, why we have the current culture around leaky gut that we do, I blame functional medicine to some extent, because for a while, I don't know if it's as prominent anymore. I kind of checked out, honestly, from my own profession, so I don't know. But for the longest time, when I was first learning functional medicine and going to seminars, like 2010, I remember explicitly people at the IFM or people at Apex saying that leaky gut was a root cause.
Yeah.
And all of us in the audience were like, totally. Yeah, like
right.
root cause medicine is great. And we would all like, yay, rah, shish, goomba at the IFM conventions or whatever it was. And that led me down the rabbit hole, personally, of quote unquote healing my leaky gut with glutamine and Repairvite and whatever for 2 freaking years before I actually got to the root cause. It's like you have to trace it back a little bit further. Like, okay, leaky gut is kind of a root cause. It's like it's like the biggest of the roots, right? When the tree first kind of splits. Like, all right, that's the first root, but then you have to dive deeper and ask, why did you get leaky gut?
Right.
It doesn't happen to everybody all the time. It's not like your body just randomly on a Wednesday decided, this would be real fun if my gut was a train wreck.
What you're saying is that the environment matters, and your stress levels, what you're putting, your diet, your lifestyle, other lifestyle factors are going to play a huge role in whether your gut's more permeable. And I think that it's really important, because I know you're mentioning supplements, which I think can be really helpful. It's not that they're not helpful with gut permeability, but I also think that, again, I think in the past there was like a level of reliance, like in your particular case, like, oh, I'm taking Repairvite, or I'm taking glutamine, I'm taking all these things, like they're just gonna like heal my gut. But you have to pull on all the levers that could be driving gut permeability, and have to really work on lifestyle factors, stress. If you're on NSAIDs, stop taking NSAIDs daily for pain. So again, there's a lot of factors that affect permeability. And maybe, again, we can kind of dive in a little bit deeper to, I know we mentioned stress, diet, NSAIDs. What else can we dive into?
Antibiotics.
Oh,
is
yeah,
a pretty
for
big
sure.
biggie. And I think it's like antibiotics and killing your good bacteria alters the microbial environment, and then the microbes are going to alter the gut lining. Hormones too. If your hormones are all swirly, that could cause leaky gut, because you need thyroid hormone to heal your gut. And if you're a woman, you do need some amount of estrogen and progesterone to heal your leaky gut. And if you're a dude, you sure as heck need testosterone to heal your gut. They're probably not going to be the thing that initially drives the leaky gut, but they're going to keep you stuck.
I think circadian rhythms can be interesting, and just timing of meals as well. I know we've talked about that a little bit. It allows your gut to prepare for food coming in, and allows for the gut to put up some defenses to let things through, but also keep things out. I also think one other factor that I've seen, it's not super common in my clients, but like alcohol is something to bring up too.
What others? There's probably a slew of medications that cause leaky gut.
Right.
But the biggies that come to mind are definitely antibiotics, NSAIDs, so like ibuprofen, etc. And corticosteroids. And sometimes, ironically, autoimmune folk wind up taking prednisone And it can be kind of a sticky place to be where like a lot of environmental chemicals and toxins probably have the ability to induce leaky gut to some extent.
I feel like we're so bombarded with stress that like knowing that it sometimes takes a lot of rest to potentially
Yeah.
build back that gut barrier, and making sure you're carving out time for deep rest to help that process
Yeah.
if you are feeling overwhelmed, I think is a really important factor.
So let's see. So we talked about what leaky gut is, things that it's associated with, uh, a bit about what causes leaky gut. Now let's get into what the heck do you do about it? The holy
Yeah.
grail,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Of like, how do you treat leaky gut?
Yeah, no, that's such a great question. And I think that when it comes to interventions, I feel like there's so many supplements that are promoted as like leaky gut support, leaky gut repair, which some of them could be incredibly helpful. So I'm not
Hmm.
discounting that, but I think, like I said earlier, you want to have all these lifestyle factors in place, or else the supplements aren't really going to make a difference.
Yeah.
Um, so I think in terms of interventions, things like getting enough sleep is really
Hmm.
key.
Yeah.
Stress management in general, making sure you're taking time for yourself.
Yeah.
The vagus nerve, which we haven't mentioned yet, so I'm happy to do it
Well, not this episode.
for this episode. Yes, we haven't mentioned it this episode. So like vagal tone, uh, that sort of thing. I know we didn't talk about it. Well, you had mentioned it with your concussion potentially being a leaky gut
Hmm.
factor, but that can also be a root cause. Um,
Yeah.
but I think again, paying attention to your nervous system, your stress response in general is
Yeah.
really key. Um, the dietary side of things, like we have been mentioning too, and hinting at, getting
Yeah.
diversity in the diet as much as possible. Obviously, removing things that might be inherently inflammatory for you, like what you were
Yeah.
saying, maybe the heavy hitters like gluten and dairy experimentation, but
Yeah.
trying to keep it broad, and maybe removing only things that you're reacting to,
Yeah.
um, and keeping it broad with plant and with plant
Yeah.
fibers.
Yeah, I think like try to diversify your plants. The meat probably doesn't matter quite as much. If
Yeah,
you, I mean, a bit, try to get some diversity in the way of fruits and vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds. Herbs and spices is a really nice way.
yeah.
And teas is a really nice way too. That if you can load up, soups and dishes with a lot of herbs, then that's a really nice way to get diversity in.
I think again things like probiotics can be helpful. Oh, I did want to mention circadian rhythm stuff, so like trying to eat at consistent meal times. I know we've mentioned that.
Yeah.
We mentioned that in the
Yeah.
stomach acid episode, I believe.
I think supplement wise, there's a million different
Right.
leaky gut healer uppers, and I mentioned
Right.
one, Repair Vite. Plain old glutamine is helpful, but like you said, you need a pretty high dose. Like I think I've seen studies go up to like 30 grams a
Yeah.
day, which is a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. For zinc, I really like zinc carnosine
Yeah.
specifically. I
Mm-hmm.
use quite a lot of that, and it's very well tolerated even by the most squirrely of autoimmune people, the most squirrely of histamine intolerant or mast cell people, who I work quite a lot with.
Like when is testing relevant, and what
Hmm.
sort of testing do you look at when it comes
Hmm.
to leaky gut?
Yeah. So I will confess, my bias, at least in this time frame right now, 2021, is I do tend to be mindful of people's budgets and not
Yeah.
spend all their money on all the things. I don't necessarily test for leaky gut on everybody, although I've thought about it before. Maybe I should, because it's not terribly expensive. There's a couple of main ways that you could test for leaky gut. The one that I tend to still use the most of, it's a little bit more of a pain in the butt to do it, and it takes time, but it is the most well researched and well supported, and it's been used for a long time, is the lactulose mannitol
Yeah.
ratio test. So you drink a sugar solution and then you collect your pee in a jug for 6 hours. And then they're looking to see how much of these two sugars got absorbed to your gut put into your blood and then filtered in the kidneys and then made into urine. So that it's pretty non-invasive. My only hesitancy is that if somebody, with like a raging case of SIBO, for example, might not do too well with the ingestion of the lactulose and the mannitol.
Yeah.
Because mannitol is a FODMAP. If somebody's got a raging case of SIBO or is definitely FODMAP intolerant, then I might not do that one. But otherwise, I tend to like that one because it's cheap. It's like, $50 or $100 maybe, depending on insurance. And it's easy enough to do. It's pretty non-invasive. And that is what the bulk of the research seems to use, or it has historically for the last like 20 years.